Meanwhile, we can discuss, any doubts if you have pertaining to ensemble learning or any topic that you have studied earlier. By the way, am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So if you guys have any doubts, we can discuss in the first 2-3 minutes till your batchmates join. So guys, let us start with our today's topic, which is dimensionality reduction. So can someone explain like what do you understand about this term? Like, so what can so just by looking at these two terms, dimensionality and reduction, what do you presume? Anyone who would like to say something? No one? Okay. So so we are going to discuss certain techniques today, where the goal of uh, you can say where our goal is to decompose our given data set. So let's say in the given data set, we have say D dimensions. So our goal is to figure out K dimensions. Obviously, K is less than D. So that's why the term reduction. So our goal is to reduce the number of dimensions while trying to preserve as much information as possible. So, so this particular area, dimensionality reduction, deals with minimizing the number of dimensions while preserving as much information as possible. Now, depending on what information you are preserving, so based on that, there could be several metrics. So we will discuss some of these techniques today. Specifically, we are going to focus on one technique. However, I'll give you however, I'll introduce you to some new dimensionality reduction techniques as well. Okay, so we are going to focus on principal component analysis today. But before that, let me just give you a brief outline. So I'll start with the motivation, like why do we need dimensionality reduction? And there are like two different types of dimensionality reduction techniques. I hope you are familiar with the term supervised and unsupervised. So in unsupervised dimensionality reduction, we do not, care about the labels while reducing the dimensionality of our data set. However, there are some supervised dimensionality reduction techniques. There, we ensure that suppose we are trying to do classification. So there we will try to incorporate some label information while reducing the dimensionality. Okay. So you may ask, like, why like dimensionality reduction is important. Like one way to think is like whenever you are collecting your data, so whenever you're thinking about constructing your features, what you do is you try to construct a lot of features, and some of these features might be redundant. So essentially, there is plenty of data available nowadays. So you collect or you amass a lot of data in terms of like different features, but not all of these features you can say are independent of each other. So the primary motivation is we are trying to reduce this dimensionality to ensure that there is as little redundancy as possible. And another way to think this would be like, I mean, if you collect more features, so basically you need more storage. So our approach is to like downsample our data, downsample the size of our data set. Okay. The second thing could be, so assume that you are in a d-dimensional space and you're trying to do a classification. So let me say that. So take this sample example. So this is a two-dimensional data set where my goal is to say figure out a decision boundary which can separate these x's and o's. Now, do you really think that this particular data set needs two dimensions to separate these x's and o's? So in this, we have two dimensions, right? X1 and X2. And if I draw a decision boundary, which can perfectly separate this. But do I really need like two dimensions? What I can do is perhaps, let's say, let me just say, let me just drop this first. Give me a second. Yeah. So perhaps what I can do is I can take and say, take an axis like this. So let's say this is, so initially I had two dimensions, X1 and X2. Now what I'm doing is I'm projecting all of my data points onto this new dimension X3. Don't confuse it with the decision boundary. So what I'm trying to convey here is that we do not effectively need two dimensions in order to, I mean, store this data set. Even though this data set is perfectly linearly separable, I can still do the same task in one dimension. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to project all of my data points onto this new dimension. Okay, so I projected all of my data points onto this new dimension, and this is just one single dimension. So I can still find this point. So all these points which are on this side, they are classified as O's. And all these points which are on left-hand side of this red marker are basically the decision point, because it's a one dimension, so it would be a decision point. So all these points that are on the left-hand side, they would be classified as X's. So even with a single, I would say a single dimension, I am still able to perfectly classify this data set. So effectively, what we are going to discuss today is that, so how to reduce these dimensions effectively while retaining as much information as possible. So you would have asked me like, what if I project the data onto say this dimension? So what if I use this as a separating hyperplane, or sorry, this as my projecting dimension? So if I use this as my projecting dimension, then all these points that you see, these x's would be projected somewhere here, and these o's would be projected somewhere here. I assume that if there was a o somewhere here, so this o would get projected somewhere in between here. So this axis may not be, or this new dimension may not be appropriate to still, differentiate these x's and o's. So how do we figure out those dimensions which can actually retain as much information as possible and still do our required task correctly? Okay, so that's the basic idea. Sometimes what happens is we do not really need a dimension. So you would have collected a large number of features in your data set. Some of these features, say, might be redundant. For example, say you have a feature, say age, and you have another feature, say date of birth. Now, age and date of birth, they are, I mean, highly correlated in the sense that if you know age, or basically if you know date of birth, I can determine my age. So this feature age is kind of redundant here. So effectively, you can remove this feature age from your data set and still do your task. And that would still yield, I mean, I would say so for each model that you train, there are certain assumptions. So assume that you were doing a regression task where you had age and date of birth both as the dimensions in your dataset. This linear regression task assumes that your dimensions are independent. However, because age and date of birth are not independent, so the performance of your linear regression model will suffer. So when you remove this age feature, your model performance will improve. So depending on, I mean, if your data set assumes or it has certain assumptions, so it would, I mean, it is always a wise decision to reduce the number of dimensions in your data set. Okay, and always like talking about the visualization perspective, let's say you have, say, 500 dimensions in your data set. Now, obviously, we cannot visualize beyond 3 dimensions. So what if I want to project my data onto a low dimensional space and I still want to visualize how the data points are? So some dimensionality reduction techniques can still help us to do this visualization in a 2 or 3 dimensional space while still giving you this information that, so suppose there are 2 points x1 and x2 in this high dimensional space. So they will try to retain the, you can say, proportional distance between x1 and x2 in this low dimensional space as well. So they will try to project these x1 and x2s in a somewhat proportional manner in this low dimensional space. Okay. Now, I hope that you would have realized that most of the models that you have studied, they use some kind of a distance metric to figure out the distance or basically to compute the error that your model is making for each point. This intuition of or basically using this distance in higher dimensional spaces does not really work well. So, and this particular terminology in machine learning terms is called as curse of dimensionality. So when you go on increasing the number of features in your data set, what you would observe is that in general, so let's say I started with one feature, maybe that feature is not enough to model the data in my data set. So you would add another feature. So you would go on adding more and more features to ensure that, I mean, I have enough information to model my task. After a while, you would observe that when you have collected, I mean, significant number of features, after a while, if you start adding more features, what you would observe is that the performance of your model will start to go down. This happens because even though we are collecting more features, we do not we are not increasing the number of samples in our data set. The number of samples, they still stay the same. Okay, so there is this I would say issue. This issue says that if you collect one more feature, so you should increase the size of your data set, I mean, in exponential terms with respect to the number of features that you're adding to your data set. So your number of samples should also increase. Okay, let me just give you an intuition of why this happens. So let's say I have a one-dimensional data set, and assume that this line has a unit length. Okay, so this line has a unit length. Okay, and the second assumption that I'm going to make is that the data points that come from this unit length vector, they follow a uniform distribution. So if you pick any point, so basically let's say, so if you pick any point, the probability of sampling this point is equal with respect to all the other points. Okay. Now, what I'm going to ask you is, let's say this particular data set has a large number of samples, let's say n. So each sample has a probability of picking 1 by n. Getting picked up is 1 by n. Now what I'll do is, let me just take a very small portion of this unit length vector. Let's call it epsilon. So this is a very small portion of this vector. So some samples might come. So you can say some samples might come from this width epsilon. So what is the probability? What is the probability that my samples are picked from the middle region and not from the epsilon region? Can you tell me? So you are given a unit length vector where the samples will be, from which the samples will be drawn uniformly. There are two portions of this data set, basically the corners of this unit length vector. And I'm going to sample some, you can say, I'm going to sample some data points from these small portions, epsilon. You can also sample some portions from this middle region. So what I'm asking is, can you compute the probability that the samples are drawn from the middle region? Any ideas? So what is the probability that the samples are drawn from this middle region? Excluding
1 minus 2 epsilon.
1 minus 2 epsilon, correct. So if you draw a sample from the middle region, the probability for that would be 1 minus 2 epsilon. Basically, if this was a k length vector, you would have divided this by k. So this would be the probability that the samples are drawn from this middle length vector. Now assume that I have a square. This is a unit length square, and this epsilon is the small portion in the very corner. I hope this is visible. So what I'm saying is, like, I'm picking these epsilons from the very corners of this two-dimensional square whose length is still 1. So can you tell me, like, what is the probability that if I exclude this? So what is the probability that the data points come from this blue region? Any ideas? So what I've extended is, I have extended the scenario of 1 dimension to 2 dimensions. So what is the probability that you get a sample from this blue region?
Same thing, sir, but instead of this line, we use the areas and divide it.
So because it's a square, can I say the probability is like somewhat close to 1 minus 2 epsilon to the power square?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So basically,
Somewhat.
like very, very close to this. Okay, so extend this analogy to d dimensions. And remember, epsilon is a very small space. So what is going to happen is that what you would see is that this probability would be 1 minus 2 epsilon whole to the power d, where d is a big number. Let's say d is close to 1000. What do you think this probability would be if d is close to 1000?
Around very near 1.
Very near to 0.
Wait. Oh, sorry. My bad.
So even if you take epsilon to be, say, 0. Say 10 to the power minus 5. Let's say 0.000001. So even if I take this, if you multiply this recursively 1000 times, this is going to get very close to 0 very soon. Right? I hope this is clear. So see, if you can imagine this as a d-dimensional cuboid, just imagine this as a d-dimensional cuboid. What I was concerned about was like these corners, these very small corners. So in this d-dimensional cuboid, the probability of a sample coming from this innermost region, except for these black circles that I have drawn, is close to 0. Now this seems counterintuitive, right? So we started with n data points, and the points are still the same here. I'm not increasing the number of points here in this d-dimensional space. All I have added is one more feature. So because, or you can say that, so all these data points that are lying, they are in this black region. The corners that I have drawn, which is a very small region as compared to like your entire space. So in order to ensure that you are able to make good decisions, so you need to have more data points in your data set. So that's the idea. So effectively, if you want to increase the dimensionality of your data set, you need to add more samples. And I mean, I would say in general, if you're adding more features, there is going to be more redundancy in your data set. And just to reduce this redundancy, we may try to create, or we may try to reduce the dimensionality of our data set while retaining the number of samples to be the same. So that's the idea. Like we get more information as we have more samples in our data set with less number of features. Okay. And obviously there is this data compression advantage when we do dimensionality reduction. Okay. Okay. So some examples of where you would see high dimensional data. One is images. Like images usually have a size of close to more than, I would say, 10 to the power 4 or so, which is like very high dimension. Okay, so think about this. So let's say that I have a data set of facial images. So these are, say, the facial images data set that I have. And my task is to predict where the person is looking. So my task is to predict if the person is looking at left or right. Okay, so that's the simple task that I have. Do you think that I need the original dimensions of my images to do this task? So let's say the images in my data set are 256 cross 256. These are all grayscale images. So I know from a given image if a person is looking, say, to the left or right. So all I have to figure out whether the person is looking to the left or right. So do you think that, do you really need this much dimension to, to do this task? Is it possible that I can project this into 2 dimensions? So basically these 256 times 256, if they can be projected to this 2-dimensional space where you can represent each data point with a, say, a circle if it's looking to the right, and if it's with a cross if it's looking to the left. Is it possible? It is. So that is the reason, I mean, given whatever the task is given to you, based on that, you can try to reduce the dimensionality of your data set to still do your task effectively. Okay. I hope this makes sense to you. If not, we can discuss more on it. Just ping me like whenever you feel there is a particular thing which is not clear to you. And the second type of data set where you would, in general, more see a large number of dimensions is text data set. So if you use, say, bag of words to represent your text documents. So usually, let's say if you have a document of, say, having English words, so the dimensionality would be close to maybe 30,000 or so. If I follow, say, Oxford Dictionary or something. Okay, so the dimensionality of that data set would be close to 30,000. And usually these models, they do not work in such high dimensional spaces. And you can imagine that not every document would be having. Do you guys know what bag of words is? Anyone? At least say a yes or no so that I know that you are aware of this.
Bag of words, that NLP concept, I think. I mean, we were taught, but long time ago. We learned it by ourselves. I think Sir mentioned it briefly once.
Okay, so the idea is, let's say you are given a document in which some text is written.
Right.
All I'm going to do is that I'm going to give you a very naive explanation of bag of words. So what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to count how many times a particular word is repeated in that document. So let's say this is the document D1 that I'm interested in, representing. So what I did was I looked at the word T1. So you can imagine this T1 word to be good. So all I'm seeing is like how many times this word good was repeated there. So as per this example, so this is 12. So essentially I'm counting frequency of each word in this document, and this is how I can represent all the documents in my data set. So, I mean, if you look at this data set is going to be very sparse. Most of the values, most of the feature values in this data set would be 0, because not every word would exist in every document. So the idea is, do we need like all these words to be our dimensions? Instead, can we use some other representation, or can we pick a subset of these words to lower the dimensionality of our data set? Or let's say I would pick only the most frequent words to reduce the dimensionality of my data set. So that's what we'll discuss today. Okay. So there are two approaches in which you can reduce dimensionality. One is called as feature extraction. So this means that you have, let's say, I'll start with some D features. So let me just say x1, x2 till xd. Okay. Can I convert these features into some new dimensions? Let me just rename these dimensions as say m1, m2 till say mk, where obviously k is less than d. So such methods are usually called as feature extraction or feature reduction methods. Okay, here remember that m1 is not the same as x1. So m1 could be a combination of, so each mi that you see here, it can be a combination of all these x1, x2, xds. So let's say if each mi is a combination of say alpha 1 times x1 plus alpha 2 times x2, and so on and so forth. Let's say alpha d times xd, where alpha 1, alpha 2, and alpha d are some coefficients. So if I do it in this way, then this is called as a linear dimensionality reduction technique. Okay, and there is I mean, so suppose if you go to some powers of, let's say if I have x1 square or x2 cube and so on and so forth, so this would become a non-linear dimensionality reduction technique. Okay, if I have a feature like square root of xt, something like that. So in that sense, you can have a non-linear dimensionality reduction technique as well. Now, the second method that I was talking about in the context of text documents. So instead of using, say, all the D features, what I do is I will pick a subset of these D features. Let me say that I pick x1, x3, x5, and say some xk. Or let me say some x7. Okay. So instead of using all these D features, I use say simply 4 features to do my task. How do I determine the importance of these features? Obviously, I would want to know like which features are important to model my task. So only those features I would pick. So this kind of technique is called as feature selection, where you select a subset of your features to do your task. And these features come directly from your original data set. Now, I don't know whether you have tried this or not. I can, so I'm not going to discuss feature selection in detail in the subsequent slides. I'm giving you some methods which you can explore at your own convenient time, so, which do feature selection. So even though we are going to study support vector machine soon, so there is a method called as support vector machine recursive feature elimination. So this is just for your knowledge. So this support vector machine, I mean, with the help of support vector machines, you can evaluate the importance of each feature. Essentially, if I hope that you guys remember what linear regression is. So let's say I have these features x1, x2 till xd, and I want to predict a real value y. So basically, y will be some combination of alpha 1 x1 plus alpha 2 x2 till alpha d xd. So some linear combination of the original features. These alphas that you see, they are the importance of each feature. Basically, the coefficients that are attached to them, they give you the importance of each feature. So it could be that say alpha 1 is say -3, and say alpha 2 is say 1.5. You tell me like which feature do you think is more important, alpha 1 or alpha 2? So so what we are interested in doing is figuring out this real valued attribute y. Sorry, just. Yeah, so what we are interested in figuring out is this real valued attribute y. So there are certain coefficients, say alpha 1, alpha 2 till alpha d. What I've asked is if the coefficient alpha 1 is -3 and if alpha 2 is 1.5, which feature do you think is more important, alpha 1 or alpha 2?
Sir, I think -3 because it gives more weight, but in the other direction.
Correct, correct. So basically you look at the amplitude. It does not mean that even if a feature coefficient is negative. So higher the value of that coefficient, basically you take the modulus in if you want to give out the exact feature importance value. You can take a normalized score as well. So so let's say if I effectively want to tell you like what is the importance of say the feature x1, what you can do is take the modulus of alpha 1 and divide it by the individual models of individual values of these alpha e's. You can simply sum them up. So this would be nothing but the importance of your feature x1 in your data set, a normalized version of it, a value between 0 to 1. So even in linear regression, you can visualize the equation with respect to these features having these coefficients, and these coefficients give you the importance of these features. So what if I keep the features, or let's say, let me just discard that particular feature which has the least importance, the least coefficient value. I can do that, right? So yes, you can do that. So there is, another method like that. That's what I was talking about, support vector machine. So what this method does is it tries to compute the feature values of or feature importances of all your
Sir,
features. Yes.
Sir, I don't know. I think this is just my problem. But I left and I rejoined, but I'm still unable to see your screen.
Okay. Let me just share it again.
Is this just me or is someone else experiencing this as well?
Yes, it is not visible.
Guys, you could have told me.
I first thought it was like from my side, so I just exited and rejoined, but it was still, yeah.
Just a second now. Okay. I hope it's visible now. Is it visible now?
I see no, sir. I don't think it is.
The black
Sir?
screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a black screen, sir.
Okay. How do I disable it? I don't have any option here. Give me a moment. I'll
Sure, sir.
Is it visible now?
No, sir, not yet.
Still black screen, sir.
It would be coming up. Or what I'll do is like I'll rejoin this meeting. Give me a moment.
It's visible, sir.
Yes, sir.
I hope it's visible now. Can you guys confirm whether you are able to see it or not?
Yes, sir. Dimensionality reduction approaches.
Okay, so I was talking about this method, support vector machine recursive feature elimination. So similar to linear regression, what this method does is it tries to compute. We will discuss support vector machines in our subsequent classes. So the intuition is you compute the importance of all the features, discard that feature which is least relevant or which is least important, again train a support vector machine model with the remaining features. So basically, if there were D features, I would now train a model with D minus 1 features while discarding that least relevant feature. So if you train this model again with D minus 1 features, D minus 1 important features, you will get the feature importances again, discard the least relevant feature, and repeat this process until you go to that point where you say end up with K dimensions, with K features, which give you a better validation accuracy than what you were getting with original D features. So that is where you stop. So this is a very popular method to reduce dimensionality, a feature selection method to be precise. Another method that you can see, like in order to look at your feature importances. So if you would have used random forest, I hope you would have. So in random forest, you can actually get the importances of all the feature values. You can visualize it in the sense that when you are trying to do a split in a tree at a particular level, higher, you can say a particular feature, if it gets selected at a higher level, that feature has more importance than any other feature who was or which was selected at a lower level. So in that sense, this random forest also tries to give you feature importances by normalizing it across all the decision trees that have been constructed. Okay. Then I don't know whether you have gone through the material that I sent you on Slack. There are gradient boosted models as well, which also use decision trees. So they also give you the feature importances. So you can use gradient boosted models like XGBoost. Pardon me for my handwriting. So you can also use gradient boosted models like XGBoost to give you feature importances. So that is like one way where you can pick the most important features and train the models with only those really important features in order to give you a better, I would say, performance. Okay. Now, in essence, when I talked about like dimensionality reduction techniques, there were two kinds: unsupervised and supervised. So this is an exhaustive list, not an exhaustive list, but I would say a very detailed list. So I'll be discussing PCA today. I mean, Dr. Arya has told me to cover PCA only, but I'm just for your knowledge sake, I'm telling you that there are several such methods. So principal component analysis we'll be discussing today. There is another method called as independent component analysis. If you want, you can explore these methods on your own. Now, when you talk about manifold learning, I'm just writing down the names of these methods. So this would help you whenever you're trying to explore these methods. So there are three methods which are really popular. One is called as isometric mapping, or the nickname is isomap, or short form is isomap. Then there is locally linear embedding. These are all manifold learning methods for dimensionality reduction. Okay, also short form is LLE. And there is, or rather, if you ever want to visualize your high dimensional data set, what I would recommend is use this one. So T distributed stochastic neighbor embedding. So most of the research papers that you would see, the short form is TSNE. So most of the research papers that if you ever study, you would see that they would have used this dimensionality reduction technique to visualize their data set in a 2 or 3 dimensional space. So I advise you to go, to explore this library. It's there. You can, it's available as a GitHub repository. You can clone it and use it as per your requirements. And there are supervised dimensionality reduction methods as well. So if you remember, we talked about this scenario where we were trying to separate X's and O's. So knowing that these are X's and O's, and I want to separate them. I can come up with a plane like this and project these data points here. What if, so in the case of unsupervised methods, you do not really care about the labels of these data points. So there are certain methods out there where which exploit this label information to get you you can say a lower dimensional space, which is I would say specific to the task that you are modeling. Okay. So these are three methods, very popular. I would say the most important is CCA, canonical correlation analysis. So under this supervised setting, this is the most frequently used method. Okay. Now let us discuss what PCA is. So in essence, if I summarize what PCA is, so the central idea I would say is reducing. We are still trying to reduce the dimensionality, where we presume that your data set consists of a large number of interrelated variables. So while projecting, so basically we have these say D features, x1, x2 till xt, and we are trying to get to some new features. Let me call them as m1, m2 till mk, where k is less than d. Not very less than, but some value less than d. So basically we are trying to find a set of new features or a set of new variables while trying to reduce the dependencies in your data set and maximizing the variance. So this is the most important point. And the new dimensions that I get, M1, M2 till MK, we call these dimensions as principal components. And these components, they are uncorrelated. What I mean by uncorrelated is they are orthogonal to each other. So these M1, M2s, they are orthogonal to each other. Okay. And we are trying to retain, I mean, I told you initially that any dimensionality reduction method tries to retain most of the information of your data set. In this particular case, that information metric is maximizing the variance while trying to reduce the dimensionality of your data set. Okay. So and another name for this is Karhunen-Love transform. Let us discuss the motivation, how it. Let's say I have these data points. So the ones I'm drawing in these black circles. So these are my data points. Now, each individual data point that you see here is represented with two dimensions, x1 and x2. Now, I gave you an example earlier where we do not really need two dimensions. So assume that if it was a classification scenario, we do not really need. So going by the same example, just give me a second. Yeah. So going by this example, I mean, I do not really need these two dimensions. I can project my data onto say this line and still do the separation correctly. But in this context, this example is not totally relatable. Why? Because this is an unsupervised technique, not a supervised technique. So think of it as if you're given some data points, and we are trying to find a new dimension. So because there are two just dimensions only. So I want to look at only that one dimension which tries to maximize the variance. So let me just create this data set again. So let's say these are my data points. So these are my data points. So let me just call these values at x1, x2, x3, and x4. Or you can say x1, y1, x2, y2, or x3, y3, and x4, y4. Let me just call these dimensions and x and y. Okay. Now, originally each data point is represented with two dimensions, x and y. Now, the same idea that follows is I can project each data point onto this vector, and So projecting this these points onto this vector will represent the data something like this. So I'm going to like make this red line horizontal, and this will be, the points would look like something like this. So if this was a green point, this was projected here. Let me call this point as, say, M1. Rather, let me use another terminology, say T1. So this point is T1. This point is T2, this point is T3, and this point is T4. So this another point T2 got projected somewhere here. T3 got projected somewhere close to in between. So this was T3, this was T2, and another similarly, there is a point T4 somewhere here. Okay. Now, if you see this particular line, or basically our new dimension onto which I have projected my data, along this line, along this line, when I have projected these data points, do you see like how my variance is getting maximized? So assume that I have another dimension. Let me just redraw this. So let me just give me a second. So these are the data points again. What if I choose this dimension as the projection for my individual data points? So looking at like these points and trying to project these data points onto an axis while trying to say minimize the distance between these points and the projected line. So what I'm saying is that let me say this, the distance of T1 from this line is D1. This is D2, this is D3, this is D4. So the distance is, total distance across all these data points is D1, D2 plus D3 plus D4. So in certain sense, I am losing this much information while I am projecting these data points onto this axis. So in some context, you can visualize it like that. So there is this much loss that is happening while I am projecting these data points onto this red axis. Similarly, if I talk about this blue line, let's say this distance is D1 prime, this distance is D2 prime, this is D3 prime, this is D4 prime. For this axis, for this particular new dimension, the total distance or the total loss that I see, the total information loss that I see is equal to D1 prime plus D2 prime plus D3 prime plus D4 prime. Where would you feel that the loss would be higher? In this example or in this example? If you compare these red and black axis, the new projected dimensions, where would you see more loss if I define the loss in terms of distances?
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yes.
You said so our objective is to essentially reduce the dimensions such that the variance among these data points is maximum.
Yeah, I'm coming to that point. So far, what I'm asking you is, for each individual, so let's say I compute the distance for a point
Right.
with respect to the new dimension.
Mhm.
Okay, and I sum it up across all the data points. So that
Right.
is like the information loss that is happening if I project my 2D dimension onto this one dimension.
Yes, yes.
So so I've given you two examples, where one example says that let's say with this red example, I have one scenario, and with this black line, I have another scenario. Where do you see the distance would be higher?
Yes. I'm guessing the distance would be higher in the y-dimensional line.
So basically, there is more information loss there.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to give you a context there. Along which line should I try to project my data points? So this is one scenario. I can have infinite such lines, right? I can take this as another line, this as another line, this as another line, where I can project my data. So which line should I pick? in
The
order
one
to
with minimal information loss.
yes, the one with minimal distance with respect to all the data points. Do you see a relation with linear regression here?
Yes, sir.
So basically what you do in linear regression, you try to compute the distance of your point with respect to the line that you're drawing, considering it to be a two-dimensional scenario. So this is the same thing. So there you're trying to minimize the projected, the distance of the data point from the projected value of the data point on that line. It's the same thing here.
Sir, but if you're if our objective data, sorry, if our objective function maximizes the variance, wouldn't that mean the data points are more spaced?
I'm coming to that. I'm just telling you, would you agree that this is like very similar to linear regression where we are trying to identify a line, and this is like one line in case of a 2D scenario where this one line is our dimension.
Yes, sir. Naturally, I mean, the best fit line already has most of the points on the line itself. So we're actually losing very less information.
And do you think that, minimizing this error, this is actually called as minimizing the residual error, or in certain, machine learning terms, it is also called as minimizing the projection error. So let me just say that if the original points are xi's, and if the projected points, let me say, are x tilde, so what you're doing is you're minimizing the projection error with respect to these points.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that the line which actually minimizes this error would be the best fit line.
Yes, sir.
Do you? I mean, this is like nothing but the equation of your linear regression.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And what about overlap, sir? Like, like, do we handle them, or it's just a part and parcel of the process?
Like overlap in what sense?
So suppose take the green diagram example, sir. You have we are projecting these data points. So suppose for the second point, there is a mirror of that thing.
Okay. No, you are taking the Euclidean distance between those 2 points, so they are always positive.
Okay.
Distances are always positive. You cannot negate those distances.
Right, but we are projecting it on that line, right?
So let's say if this distance is d1. So this is on the upper side of this line, and this distance is d2. So you will not be doing, so d2 is not negative. So you can assume d2 is the Euclidean distance between this green point and this red point.
Okay.
So
I
basically,
thought we were.
No, we are not. No, we are not negating it in any way.
Okay.
So I'm not going to prove this, but take my word for it. Minimizing the so this is called as minimizing the projection error. Okay. So minimizing the projection error is equivalent to maximizing the variance.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, ensure that you know this, because this would not be there in some books. Okay. So when you try to minimize you can say the distance of a point with respect to the projected line, this is equivalent to maximizing the variance. So you can visualize it in this way that, okay, let me just give you, or let me just rub this here and, give me 1 second, please. Okay. I'll redraw these examples again so that you will have a better understanding. And so what I've just claimed is, if you minimize the projection error, that is equivalent to maximizing the variance. Okay. And can you tell me what variance is? I mean, I hope you know that variance is nothing but
square of standard deviation.
Square of standard deviation. So basically, I subtract the mean from each individual data point and square it up and then add it up across all the data points. So this is nothing but your variance, where x bar is your mean. So let's say what I've done is I have standardized my data set. So from each feature, I have subtracted the mean. Now, this is the representation of my standardized data set. Basically, from each feature, I have subtracted the mean, and this is just a representation of my data set. Now, when we were discussing like which line reduces the minimum, which line minimizes that projection error. So I just gave you example that this could be another line, right? So think about this. The line which best fits your model, or compared to say this line. So if you project these data points onto this line, obviously these distances D1, D2, D3, D4, their sum of it, so D1 plus D2 plus D3 plus D4, their sum is much higher than the scenario of this blue line. Sorry, this I don't know in which color this is visible to you. So if you compare this blue line with this purple line, so the projection error of this blue line, which is nothing but this D1 plus D2 plus D3 plus D4, is much higher than projection error of this purple line. And we have already discussed that which line will minimize this error. The one where you, where you get the least projection error. And this is the same as what we do in linear regression. Now, can you visualize that the line which gives you this least projection error also maximizes the variance as well? See, what do you mean by variance? So look at these data points once they are projected. So these are the 4 data points. So you know that variance is nothing but, I would say, if I project my data points onto an axis, variance, you can presume it to be the width of those data points. So this would be the variance. Basically, if the mean of this data point lies somewhere here, so if the mean of this data point somewhere here, you can say that this is nothing but, the width is actually denoting how varied your data is. Basically, whatever this metric is, this is actually denoting how varied your data is along this new axis. Now look at this purple line. How varied your data is. This is this much. If the mean is somewhere close to here, if you look at from the mean, this purple line has more varied projection than this blue line. And take my word for it, whichever line gives you the least projection error will give you the maximum variance. So I just wanted to give you an intuition of why this happens and wanted to show you pictorially that if you take that line which gives you the least projection error, that line is going to give you maximum variance. I hope this is clear to you. Or you intuitively have this understanding of why PCA or how this PCA is trying to maximize the variance while trying to give you the least projection error. So tomorrow we'll study like the mathematical interpretation of PCA. Okay, so before coming for tomorrow's class, I just want you to go through a couple of topics. I hope you have done or you know of the topic eigenvalues. So revise this topic eigenequation. And what are Lagrange multipliers? Have you studied Lagrange multipliers before? Say a yes or no.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you already know of Lagrange multipliers. I just want you to know of like what is eigenequation. And if possible, study about singular value decomposition. Because I'm not going to cover these topics in detail because covering each topic will take a whole class. So tomorrow's class, whenever we are having our next class, that will be purely mathematical. So go through these topics if you can. One thing that you should know like by heart is the eigenequation. I'm not going to explain this eigenequation again. I'm just going to leverage some understanding of this eigenequation to derive the equations of PCA. So this is it from my side today. Any doubts we can discuss right now? If you're done, you can leave the meeting.
Oh, sir.